Hi and welcome to Hospitality Huddles. I'm Scot Turner and each episode we'll be uncovering the industry's biggest challenges and serving up the solutions to help overcome them. We're bringing together some of the best thought leaders in the industry and finding some of the most creative minds shaping the future of hospitality from all around the world. They're going to share insights tackling the pain points operators just like you face every day. Hospitality Huddles is more than a podcast, it's a community of passionate individuals who appreciate the art and science of hospitality and want to help answer the difficult questions. If you like the show, one of the best ways to support us is to hit that subscribe button and leave a review. It's only going to take a couple of minutes and it really does make the difference. So let's get on with today's episode, and all that's left to say is welcome to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality meets conversation, one huddle at a time. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the next episode of Hospitality Huddles. And today I'm joined by a marketing genius, a podcast guru, and just a genuinely great guy, which is Justin Ulrich. So, Justin, thank you very much for coming on and sparing some time with us today.
You bet. Thanks for the kind words in the intro. Definitely wouldn't consider myself to be a genius with any regard. I can't even put a sentence together. So thank you for having me.
Well, I just had to live up to the intro that you did for me when I was on your show. So, but definitely you're in those spectrums. Justin, before we give a little moment for you to explain who you are and talk about your background, we always start with one question, which is, what does hospitality mean to you? So, I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say on this one.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think hospitality applies to every facet of your life. It's not just within the hospitality industry. Hospitality to me means just being an all around, genuine, good person, trying to create genuine experiences in every facet of your life. You know, whether it's with your friends, with your family, with business partners, with customers, trying to make them feel welcome, make them feel, for lack of a better term, loved. You know, everyone has value. Being able to demonstrate that you find value in others to them, it's incredible. You know, if you think of the impact you could have on somebody's life just by being positive, you never know what they're going through. I know there's been plenty of conversations about this in the industry, and there's awesome groups like Burnt Chef Project and stuff like that to help folks deal with mental health. You never know what they're going through. So, whatever you can do to go out of your way to make someone feel welcome and feel loved and show kindness, that to me is hospitality.
Yeah, it's a really good point, to be fair, and it comes up a lot when I ask the question about that whole thing of it can stretch across any spectrum of life as well, isn't it? So it's that's why I asked the question, because it's great to just hear what different people see into it. So, Justin, for people who might not know you and might not be seeing the amazing stuff that you're doing over on LinkedIn with the guys at Evocalize, can you just give 60 seconds overview of your background and who you are and what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. My background spans multiple different industries, from um, payment processing to telecom to software to within restaurant space. I did a short stint in the power sports industry at Polaris, so I've got some B2C experience. A lot of my focus has been on demand generation, on partner marketing, channel marketing. I like to try to find new ways to cut through clutter and to engage audiences in ways that other folks aren't, because that is how you build your audience and how you gain momentum. Here at Evocalize, we automate local digital marketing based on location specific data. So we're able to help multi-location businesses insert themselves into conversations through ads across Google, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, etc. Insert themselves into the customer journey when at the right time and in the right place. So they're able to cut through the clutter as well and get to the customer where it's most important when they're about to make that purchase.
And it's brilliant to have someone on here, and we're going to touch on the podcast and some of the value that you're bringing for local marketing, because it's definitely something that I talk about quite a bit as well in terms of looking at local communities. But in terms of that whole piece on
Mm.
um, kind of ads and Google ads and Facebook and things like that, I've been sat in so many conversations over the years where um, the easy thing to do is to just put onto Google Maps, and then there's never really an ROI that comes out of it. It's just kind of like it's almost it's something that's done. How does Evocalize kind of break that down and give some real kind of tangible focus areas that it does to step in to help with some of those strategies that you were talking about?
So during the implementation process, we meet with the corporate team. We sell into the corporate team, typically at enterprise locations that have distributed kind of model. So that's restaurant. It could also be franchise and mortgage, real estate, other industries as well. We work with that corporate team to determine, hey, what are your goals that you're trying to achieve, and how can we leverage paid digital marketing to help you attain those goals? And based on those goals, whether you're trying to drive traffic, if you're trying to drive more online sales, more app downloads, whatever it may be, we can build what we call blueprints around those goals. And a blueprint is a packaged marketing program that it can be one touch, it can be multi touch, it can be one time, it can be automated. But those programs incorporate all the different elements. So it's got your audience in there, your branding assets, your images, your text, different text variations if you want to try some dynamic stuff, any sort of compliance or rules, anything that you want to bake into this program to kind of lock things down for your individual users out in the or your operators out in the field at their different locations to be able to activate these campaigns either manually, or they can do them. We can launch them automatically based on that location's specific data. So, like as an example, if you've got a location in Des Moines, which is it's always the location that's called out. I was talking with Jeremy Julian about this. Like, why is it always Des Moines? But it's funny because Des Moines isn't really one of those huge metro areas like Chicago, New York, LA that are going to get the love of the marketing spend anyway, right? So you have one of these locations that's kind of, out, for lack of a better term, in the middle of nowhere that needs some help in driving traffic. Well, we can take based on that location's data and we can launch ads right around that area to drive traffic to that location, as opposed to just pushing national ads out. And the other benefit to it is you're able to take the local promotion and add a little bit of local flair to it, because you know that even though you have you might have 2, 3, 400 locations, 1,000 locations plus, although it's the same brand, each location in each community has its own personality to some degree. So you can also take those kind of prepackaged programs that we put together and allow users to add their local flavor to them as well.
Yeah, it's really powerful, isn't it? So, like, essentially, I'm Mr. Operator, and I'm starting to see sales dip, or the weekend, for whatever reason, there might be something going on outside the
Mm-hmm.
front of the store. It needs a bit of a boost. I can go on as the operator. I've got my budget preset from central office, and I can activate something super micro to start driving traffic into my location, and obviously pick those sales back up.
Yeah, if you want to do that, yeah, manually, we could also set it up to where if sales are low on Wednesday and you're running low and you're slow and you're maybe not hit your target on Saturday, it can automatically launch an ad on the platform or multiple platforms that you choose when we're setting up those programs. There's lots of really cool use cases because we can actually push any data at all into our platform and trigger or manage ads across platforms. Turn them on, turn them off, change content, whatever you want to do based on that data. So it could be point of sale data, it could be your sales data, it could be CDP data. You could build your audiences a certain way, and those can change within the program. So if you have like people who have been in once, people have been in 5 times, people have ordered certain products, You could have inventory. Let's say you have excess kale that's going to spoil because nobody eats the stuff. You could launch a 20% off promo for kale smoothies to that certain location that has too much, so you can mitigate spoilage and kind of loss due to food management. Um, there's all sorts of different use cases. Local high school wins a game, launch a promo. Weather's sunny today. We open the patio, like launch an ad. There's so many ways that you can leverage your data. That's why the tool is so cool. You can literally any goal that corporate has in mind, we can build programs around them, and then we also bring to the table best practices. So we can also make suggestions as to where to start if the corporate team doesn't really know what works best. Maybe they haven't tried paid. As an example, we can jump in and give them solid guidance.
I think sometimes certainly from an operations perspective, sometimes when you hear something that can be so kind of niche down into an activity that can help generate sales, I think sometimes it gives a lot more confidence as well, doesn't it? So when your marketing team might be sitting there and setting an audience and doing a generic ad that goes out to probably mass, the
Mm.
being able to niche down and being able to like really drive micro is argument would tell you that it's going to have a good impact. And it was funny at the weekend. This is probably well timed because actually last towards the end of last week, I was on the train home and I was on Instagram, flick through. There's a sponsored ad from a bakery here called Gail's Bakery,
Hmm.
and it was like bring a. I have to tell a story to get in what I'm about to get in, Justin. You'll like
Did
it.
they have
But anyway,
croissants?
I signed up to exactly. I signed up to the. I just wait. I signed up to the thing, and it was get a free croissant, and I was like,
Mm.
Brucey. So yeah, but do you know what?
Brucey.
It's probably 5-6 miles away from my house. We drove to it because I'm from the north of England. We're religiously a bit tight, so anything for nothing, out for now we call it. And as we were going there, my wife was like, "Oh, maybe I should try and get this." She couldn't find this ad anywhere, and I was just like, "Well, listen, I'm obviously like the old guy who was a perfect target market, like, and it was just targeted and it hit, but it was just a great example. I thought of Evocalize actually at the time because it was like just on the note at the right time, hit the note, and everyone in there was scanning these QR codes to get the free pastries, and it just goes to show, doesn't it, how sometimes hitting that micro niched message at
Hmm.
the right time can really have a big impact.
Yeah, the best marketers in the world like know how to segment their audience really well, and that's what we help you do if you don't have it set up or you don't know how to segment your audiences. But what's interesting about paid digital is you can't one to one market someone with a paid ad. It's not allowed. But what you can do is based on certain engagements, how they've, if there's certain events that have happened, or they've engaged with an ad in a certain way, or they've fit a certain demographic, you can build lookalike audiences around those things. And you can also take, like, if you do have um, an audience that you're building out, let's say you actually have customer information or whatever, you can build an audience around, if you have enough people, then you can build an audience and serve ads up to that audience as a whole. And if they're part of it, they'll get served up the offer. But it's something where you can't just say, hey, it's not like personalization like with an email, like, hey, I want to send this one, I have this person's info, I'm going to send them this one ad. It doesn't quite work that way. So if you could figure out a way to do like we do, where you're doing it at scale, and you're building your audiences correctly, you can actually set up audiences for each step of the buying journey. And from whether they've not been there before, you're trying to bring in new audiences or new customers, or maybe they're a repeat guest, or maybe they're a repeat guest, haven't been back in 60 days, or they're a repeat guest and maybe they've ordered steak 3 times, or whatever it might be. Like, you can really nail down, like you said, niche audiences and serve specific messaging to them. It does get a little pricier the more narrow you get, but still, it's like it's higher quality, and that's whether you're using our platform or not. Anytime you narrow down an audience, like if I go on LinkedIn and I try to do some ads and I get really really narrow, It's just really expensive because they know that's like, if I'm going to get to this very narrow audience, I'm going to be competing with other folks who are also trying to reach that same audience, and the price goes up.
Yeah, but it's back to what you're saying, isn't it? The quality's there, so you would probably see a larger volume of quantity come through in terms of success, wouldn't you? So I guess it's just horses for courses at the end. Maybe you need a little bit more budget, but the returns is probably going to net the same or more. Uh,
Yeah, and you can also, yeah, exactly. You can also you can target very specific within restaurant. You can target very specific neighborhoods too. So if you know you have a certain type of food that you know certain folks in certain neighborhoods will like, you can set up audiences that way. Or if you have a stadium nearby or something else like where you have office buildings or whatever, where you have a high concentration of folks in a small area, like you can get really, really, really targeted. So that way, you know that are you're not just blasting your message out to folks who may not fit your demographic who typically come in. If I'm a smoothie shop, I'm going to probably want to target younger audiences. So I may want to push more ads around certain areas where I know there's younger families, or have more children or teenagers or whatever it might be, or around school, areas where schools are, whatever it might be. um, our our CEO tells a pretty funny story. He came home. Smoothie King it's no secret they're one of our clients, but he came home from work and there's a Smoothie King cup sitting on his counter. He's like who got Smoothie King? Like his kids can't drive, like his wife wasn't home, whatever. And the daughter was like, "Well, I was just on TikTok and I saw the ad, so I ordered it." And it's like, if you know like you have a certain demographic around your location and you are not marketing to them, like think about that. You could People have like I mean, to my boss is like, he has his, obviously this kid has his credit card information, was able to make a purchase without even an adult taking them into the location. Like it was very easy. It didn't have to, it wasn't a cash transaction, but it was like seamless. So if you're doing things at a digital, on digital channels, you're able to scale your efforts and get to folks, cast your net a little bit wider while still staying focused on the folks that you're trying to go after.
Yeah, I mean that's a brilliant example, isn't it? It's just sometimes it's not even the person with the credit card; it's the person who uses the credit card that's the most important
Right.
thing, isn't it? I mean, it's
Right.
note to self for my kids as they grow up: make sure that they can't get hold of your credit card, right?
Yes, I trust me. We have a PlayStation and my son likes to get on and play Fortnite. And I'm like, dude, you cannot. Like, you cannot buy things. They see points. They don't see the dollars that are associated with buying the points to get the thing, you know.
Exactly. Yeah, totally. And I guess, like, looking at local marketing, and you launched the podcast, the Local Marketing Lab. I was on it quite early on, and I was really pleased to see it in Toast's lineup yesterday because it's really well deserved. Some of the people that you've got on it are just absolute legends when it comes to the restaurant business. Like, what have you learned from doing that podcast? Whether that's from a local marketing perspective, from some of the guests, or just the rewards of doing the podcast, because I'd love to go in more on this because it really is like it's a brilliant show.
Yeah. I would say, like, high level, if you haven't started your own podcast or some sort of way to consistently generate content, um, you need to do it. Like, and that, I mean, at the risk of me telling our competitors too, like, this is something that if you are going to drive like engagement, awareness, build your audience, engage your spheres, like if you're in real estate, whatever it might be, like if you have a podcast and you're able to find a way to consistently deliver content that's engaging, if it's educational, if it provides value, those folks are going to continue to follow you, right? And they will be nurtured along to the point where they're ready to make a purchase. And when it comes time, you'll be top of mind, right? When I was in, I worked at Polaris and I led the brand marketing team for a couple of their off road brands, one of them being Razor. And with that brand, it's a side by side. It's a cool toy, but they cost like 15 up to $45,000 for a toy, and it's like people aren't buying them every single day of their life. So we know that it was a 9 month buying cycle. We had to do things to keep folks engaged during the entire process, like from when they bought their vehicle to maybe a year or two later to when they wanted to upgrade. So developed all sorts of cool ways to like create content that was really engaging and just kept the brand top of mind. So when it can kind of make the purchase, they thought of us, right? It's the same thing that you apply within really any vertical you're in, even outside a restaurant. The podcast is so important because it not only allows you to create that cool content, you learn over time, you create more engaging content over time, like you find out what works, what doesn't. The faster you do content, you accelerate your learnings in that regard. It gets you in front of folks and audiences that you otherwise wouldn't have had access to. So if you're trying to develop awareness, like it's a great way to get in front of different audiences. Every guest that you bring on is someone that they have an audience of followers that now they'll have exposure to you and to your brand. So if you can have the podcast and have it be one where you're bringing on guests and not just talking on your own, even better, right? You're casting your net even wider. Um, but to take a step back, I think what it also really helps with my viewpoint on doing business is not like hard sell. Like I don't I it's just not it's not in my being to go and try to hard sell. So that's why I'm in marketing and I support the sale, but I don't sell, right? Um, what I like to do and my approach is always give, 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 give. And if I give, eventually it's going to come back to me. And it has. I've seen it happen in many facets of life, in business, with the podcast, everywhere, right? If you give, it's going to come back to you. So when I started the podcast, I focused on just giving. I had the idea. We talked about doing it. I'm like, I'm not plugged in into the industry enough to be able to bring on good enough like guests that are going to provide valuable content, have audiences that we can leverage. Like I felt like it was going to be me interviewing my friends. And although my friends are great people, I won't name them by name because I have one. But his audience isn't that big. No. Um, but anyways, so I engaged, reposted, shared, gave thoughtful commentary on folks' posts, build relationships, right? Built rapport to the point where it's like, hey, I see you're doing this great thing. I love what you're doing. I'd love to try to pursue the same thing. I'd love to have you on, create a podcast and have you on as one of my first guests. I did it with Sean Walchef. Such a great dude. Like, if anyone knows Sean, I shout him out on everything I do. He literally he goes out of his way to make himself available to help others succeed, which I love, right? So brought him on as a guest. He recommended someone else, recommended someone else. That person, it kind of snowballs, and you can kind of ask your guests who to bring on. So now you're also the whole time that you're bringing on guests, you're promoting them, promoting their business, right? And this whole thing just kind of snowballs and gains you tons of momentum and gets you exposure the entire time. So even though I'm not trying to, the part of the intent from a strategic perspective is to get awareness. That's why we do it. But it's also like it plugs directly into my core, which is like giving, 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 and helping promote others. So it's like I get to do the thing I love to do, and it's fun. Like you'll see, I'm on LinkedIn all the time, but then I'm also creating valuable content that helps other people grow their business, which is also great. I love the fact that I can deliver value, not even from my own viewpoints, but from other industry pros who have been there and they've done that. Deliver value to folks who are potentially struggling and maybe on the verge of closing their business, shuttering their doors. Like, these are some things that you could do today to implement to try to turn things around. And I think sometimes folks just need a kind of a kick in the pants or maybe an idea to spark something, and that will help them, move toward a positive direction. That's kind of a bunch of just verbal blech from me with regards to the podcast, but I love doing it. I think it's been a ton of fun. It's been super impactful to our business, and it's been impactful for me as I just continue to learn and grow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I think Sean's name comes up on most stuff I do as well. To be honest, especially on these conversations, because it was Sean when I was writing on LinkedIn. That's where we met. Obviously, I was doing written form every day. Knew I needed to start doing something else, but just didn't have the I don't know the confidence, I guess, to do it. And I spent 30 minutes with
Yeah.
Sean, and since then, haven't looked back. And he's just got a unique way of being able to kick you up the butt without in such a nice way. Like it's just
Yeah.
and I think a lot of credit probably with people listening to this who are obviously in our network would probably credit Sean with the same. I think back to the bit about adding value and creating value. I think we've talked a lot before about LinkedIn and how to leverage LinkedIn as much as possible. And I think it's something where it's very B2B driven right now. I think there can be a lot more done in the B2C space, and we're playing with stuff with
Mm.
clients by doing that as well. But that whole thing about creating value, sharing knowledge, and playing the long game is definitely something that I'd want anyone who's listening to this to really heed from, because it doesn't mean you have to start creating content straight away, does it? It's more about how you were saying, turn up every day, start being seen in the right places, make comments, make insightful comments, build trust with people, and then start going into content creation from there. It's really
Hmm.
that whole kind of showing up and engaging and building relationships is the key to kind of
Hmm.
utilizing that platform properly, isn't it?
For for sure. If you think about podcasts first, if you have more than 20 episodes, it's said that you're in the top 1% of podcasts in the world. Why is that? Because it's longevity, it's consistency. People typically don't outlast 20 episodes. Again, why? It's hard. It takes energy, it takes time, it takes dedication, it takes persistence, it takes failing, you know. But all that said, if you get past that hurdle, now you're into a territory where you're seeing benefits. So it's not just like the short term, like, hey, I'm going to put out an episode, I'm going to drive a bunch of leads from it. It will never happen. I mean, I could, from my perspective, it didn't happen that way. And from everyone I've talked to, you will never drive tons of leads or whatever your goal is, like just from a few episodes, right? It's an investment. And I think if people look at it as an investment in their time and what they can do, if I had an example for you, Monty Silva. I was on an industry call with him, digital hospitality call that Sean leads weekly on Wednesdays. Check it out. Um, he said that for 6 months he wanted to try something. He said he was struggling to kind of grow his business. He didn't see, I guess he didn't, I should say, I shouldn't say struggling. He didn't see the growth that he was wanting to see, right? And so he said, you know what? I'm going to try something new. For 6 months, he didn't tout anything about his business. He only promoted others. 6 months. He doubled his business. He doubled his revenue by not talking about his business. Like, people don't want to hear, like Sean talks about, like, be the show, not the commercial. People don't want to hear the commercial. If you help others, you share their content, you offer encouragement, you play the long game and you do it well, it's going to come back to you just like it did with Monty. It doubled
Yeah.
his business. So if you look at the podcast as a long-term play and not a short-term win, like, you'll see benefit, you'll see traction, you'll see leads, you'll see closed deals. We just closed a deal this week. It went dark. Re-engage them, invite them on the podcast, spark things back up. We just closed it, right? So there is direct business ties to doing the podcast that I think folks don't think about. They think, oh, I don't want to do it. The other part is, and I know I'm rambling, so jump in if you want me to stop. People tend to think this is a very common thing. You hear about imposter syndrome all the time. People tend to think like, oh, that's not me, that's somebody else. Like, let them do it. Like, I'm not comfortable on the microphone. Like, I don't want to do this stuff. I would encourage you to give it a try, right? I know imposter syndrome is a real thing. I look at imposter syndrome as as your body's way and your mind's way of telling you that you're uncomfortable with what's happening. And so you don't want to do it. Like, that's just not me. You can be anything. If you put your mind and your effort to it, you can literally be anything, right? Whether that's with your career or whether that's how you want to show up with content, whatever it may be, all you have to do is start. If you look at LinkedIn, 3% of users on LinkedIn create content. 3%. Think of how much opportunity it is to get in there. And if you're the one that starts creating really powerful content that actually starts cutting through clutter, look at the size of the opportunity for you to get in front of audiences that you've never even considered getting in front of. 3%. 97% of people are on LinkedIn just to listen. Millions of people. I don't know how
Yeah.
many million users. How many million users do you know?
Uh,
I would
do you
I
know? I
would
don't
guess there's
actually
got to
know
be
what it
almost
is,
a
but
billion.
it's got to be yeah, got to be
It's definitely more
almost
than
up there, hasn't
100.
it? Definitely, it's got to be. It's got to be up there towards a billion, I think. But do you know, it's funny you should say that. It took me 6 months to get my first direct lead from LinkedIn, and I was posting every single day, and sometimes twice a day, and I was trying the newsletters. Everything was written form at that point. It took me 6 months. That person had never liked one of my posts, had never commented on one of my posts, had never reshared any of my posts. So
Mm,
I when people look at it and say, don't get hung up on impressions and don't get hung up on metrics, I don't agree with that on the basis of don't get
100%.
hung up on metrics. Don't get hung up on metrics that you're sitting there going, oh, aren't I doing a great job? I've got 1,000 likes. Because if that 1,000 likes delivers a lead, then that
Yeah.
person lurking in the background is important from a metric perspective. So I think, yes, don't get caught up on vanity metrics. Don't start thinking, you're a superstar just because you've got 5,000 followers or whatever it might be. Do get hung up on, if I can get my brand in front of as many people as possible, that makes it much more likely I'm going to get a lead, which I can then convert after. I think the other thing that I've seen from LinkedIn, and we've talked about this before, and I'd be interested to know what you guys get at Evocalize as well, is I find conversion on LinkedIn from leads through LinkedIn much easier than
Hmm.
leads coming through the website or cold leads coming in, because there's already that trust, there's already that
Right.
sharing of expertise, so that for the person to kind of go, Scott, let's have a chat, I've already kind of shown them that I have got experience in what I'm doing. They already like the
Yeah.
way I talk, they already like my style. So then when it comes to it, it's about learning more about them. So what I find is that first conversation is more about them talking than me talking, which is always a great
Hmm.
way to be. And then it's more about how do we get to a place where we're both comfortable with the cost and we sign off and go. So I think that, don't underestimate that whole bit of sharing knowledge. Don't be selfish about it. Be selfless and try and give people it there. And it makes the whole process after quicker. But back to your point of what you were saying, don't expect it to come straight away, because it does take time. But once it
Yeah.
does, it starts coming through. And I think those lurkers is the really key one, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
sometimes it's the people who aren't commenting and stuff.
Yeah. I would say, I think you're exactly right. On the metrics piece, like, yeah, people call them vanity metrics all the time. I've heard it my whole career. They are to some extent, but they're also metrics. If you're not gauging your activity based on a baseline of some sort and metrics to show improvement or optimization, you're just guessing. You're gambling. Like, you have to have a baseline to see like what it is that you're doing and how effective. Like, where did you start? The changes that you make, how effective are they? Do more of the more effective things and dial back on the other things. That's why we post 30 times a week. Our unit metrics aren't as good as others, but are, as an aggregate, we're crushing. We are crushing. If you look at impressions, total engagements, total comments, those types of things, right? Um, Guiding people, like, oh man, I've got so many things to talk about. Uh, we started doing what you, Scott, you actually gave me the advice that you'd heard somewhere else. uh, Take a blog post, replicate it as an article on LinkedIn, right? If you do that, you're keeping people on platform. The algorithms continue to serve up your content. to folks and give more impressions to that content because you're not driving them off the platform. So they appreciate it. We did tests, reposted the same post a couple months later where we kept them on platform, relatively the same engagement, the same clicks, the same everything. Same thing, except for the second time we posted I'm in a mirror, so the second time we posted, it actually had 30% less, 30% fewer engagements, fewer impressions, right across the board, because the algorithms don't serve it up as much, and that 30% number was consistent across multiple posts that we tested this on. So by not trying to drive people straight from the post to your site, we were actually engaging more folks and we were driving more people to our site. If you look at from when we started doing it in Q2, where we were just posting and trying to drive people to our site, versus Q4, we more than tripled our traffic, organic traffic, sourced from LinkedIn to our website, tripled it because by not trying to drive them to our site, which is weird. But you do it through other ways. You don't do it in the post. You do it in the comments. You do it on the articles that you create. You do it on the newsletters that you create. Like, there's other ways to drive people to your site and not just straight off the post. So if you figure out like the system and how it works, you can make it work in your benefit to get people to come back to you, to eventually convert them on your page, to then turn them into a lead, right? Because now they've learned a little bit about you and they've already gained interest on the content that you're posting, right? And you're driving them back to your page and converting them. The second thing that you talked about was with regards to building that trust. Think about if you're trying to hire someone, you're hiring for any position, and think like director level, VP level, a high up position. Typically, if you think about any position, people typically hire someone they know and they've worked with in the past, or they know their work ethic, as opposed to going with the unknown. Why? Because the known, you know what you're dealing with. It's such a risk to go with the unknown. If you're constantly putting out content out there that talks about the things you believe in, how you approach business, what you think is most important, use cases, case studies, whatever it might be, to show and prove that you know what you're talking about, when that lurker or that follower or whoever it is comes to you, they're doing so because they've already gotten a peek behind the curtain and they know what it's going to be like working with this person and what they could potentially do for their business, as opposed to you know someone coming to your website and learning about you for the first time. Like you're talking about, your conversion rate's going to be higher on the lead that comes in straight from conversations that happen on LinkedIn. That's how it is for us too.
Yeah, for sure. And do you know, it's as I was saying, we've started to try testing this now in B2C um, ways as well. So with a restaurant in central London, we're actively kind of going around and trying to find offices and people who might come into the restaurant for lunch, and then the restaurant managers actively kind of starting to engage and talk to the people who are influencers in those offices very much the same
Mm-hmm.
way. It's a long game, but it's building up relationship. It's trying to kind of strike that thing going, trying to make things relevant for them, and talking about, posting stuff about business lunches. And isn't it a pain when the PA has to try and find somewhere and it's miles away and you get stuck in traffic? And there's all those type of things where you can take what B2B people are doing quite well, uh, in the minority, and try and flip that into a B2C conversation and still have the same things. And it's interesting. It's obviously a bit unique. It's a bit different. So it's there's been some fails, there's been some hit wins. But I think I heard you say on I think it might have been a different podcast. I think it was with Jeremy, where you were saying, like, if people aren't doing it and you're standing out, at some point you're going to flip that intrigue and someone's going to go, actually, this guy is doing something a bit different, let's go try it out. Because if he's doing something different, the restaurant probably is. And it's all that thing, isn't it, about, like you say, if 3% of people are posting, you've got your unique opportunity to stand out. Because I guarantee, looking at being in hospitality all my career, most people I bet that figure is less in hospitality because most people use it as a CV rather than a way to drive engagement, build value, share
Yeah.
knowledge, and establish a brand, doesn't it?
And that's honestly how I used to be when I first started my career. It was like, I'm going to connect with as many people as possible. I'm going to have the best resume shown. I'm going to have it linked to my portfolio, all this stuff, right? If as a marketer, if you can't market yourself, like what good are you marketing a business, right? It's the most important thing you can market is yourself. So that was my stance, and so I constantly just focused on like optimizing the profile. And don't get me wrong, I was getting offers like weekly, people reaching out trying to recruit me to go to other businesses. So it is super helpful from a personal standpoint. But when I shift, I actually it was more in this role because as the lead, the marketing leader, like if we don't get the name out there, like Sean says, no one's coming to tell your story, and I'm leading the marketing team. I have to push the story out there, and I have to get it, shout from the rooftops like what we're doing. So that's why I took more of a shift to giving more on LinkedIn as opposed to just sitting on my couch and maybe like once in a while doing it casually like I used to. I do it with purpose now, and it's actually been extremely helpful. To get to what you said about cutting through the clutter. So when I was at Polaris, B2C, we looked at LinkedIn as a channel, and at the time, one of my leaders had said, "Well, LinkedIn, like why wouldn't you go on LinkedIn? All of your demographic that we're targeting 40 something, like mid 30s to 40s, people with corporate jobs who make over a certain amount of money a year, and basically you can line up all the demographics. It's like the platform not only allows you to do ads based on those things, but if we're pushing out organic content, we're going to be engaging people with people in a way that cuts through the clutter, right? So we started pushing
Mm.
posts across LinkedIn. Think about how many B2C things you see on LinkedIn. I personally don't really see that many. Maybe just because I'm not subscribed
No.
to feed or to folks that would provide it. But when you see a side by side come ripping through a mud hole and just throwing like muddy water everywhere, it was super cool. They're like ripping through the sand, kicking up dust. It got thousands and thousands and thousands of engagements. It was crazy to see because people, even though it's a business platform, they like to see exciting things. So if you're not communicating with businesses, even in B2B, because we're B2B, right? We don't look at it as we're selling to businesses. Like me personally, I'm selling to people and I'm communicating to people and building relationships with people, right? And they have interests and they have things that they find exciting. Some of the most engaging posts that I've put out on LinkedIn really have nothing to do with business. Like I did the Wow Wow post, like going to buy him at the store. I did a Lego stop motion that my son made. I did a couple of them. Those things shot through the roof. What's funny is I put one of those out there and it engaged so well. Andy Freivogel from Science called up and said, "I want to hire your son to make a video," and he did. It was awesome, right? But it's like that type of content because it's different. It stands out. It's engaging. If you could find ways to do that, that's where you're going to be successful in terms of getting people's attention. Once you have their attention, you have to provide value though. So that's where the other types of content come into play. So if they start following you because of certain things, then you're providing value, then they'll keep following you.
Yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes it's, well, not sometimes, I know really, it's nice to bring a bit of that personal element into it as well, isn't it? Like letting people see you, the person, rather than you, the marketeer, or you, the Evocalize guy, or you, the podcast guy. Like, sometimes people
Mm-hmm.
connect with that gets them engaged to go, actually, he isn't scared to show who he is as well. I think that's
Yeah.
that's the other thing to do in terms of when it's looking at content. It's not be too serious sometimes. I think that sometimes when I do my
Mm-hmm.
posts is, like you focus on the hook, and generally the hook is something that's either going to inspire someone to read or is going to sit there and make them go, oh shit, that's me. Because
Yeah.
the post is something like, I don't know, 24 challenges that an F&B guy deals with on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes I look at my post content, I'm like, am I being a bit too negative this week? Let's start trying to liven it up with different bits. And it's just, yeah, like that personal bit, and trying to, you've got to sell pain points, because that's the easiest way to try and get people in. But you've also got to
Mm-hmm.
give people the inspiration that it doesn't always need to be a sale to fix some of the simple bits as well, isn't it? Like I shared one today that
Yeah.
was just like, here's 6 ways that you could make money in a hotel that people don't usually think of. And it was, I don't know, there was focus on community, there was podcast studio, there was retail thing. Sometimes it's just give people the answers, because
Yeah,
when
yeah,
they then go and they can't implement, they're going to come back and go, actually, great idea. I really like it, but I've not been able to do it. Can you help?
yeah, yeah. And I think too, when you give those ideas, like sometimes all it takes is just a spark for the
Mm,
fire to take off, right? So you mentioning like do this thing is going to inspire someone like, I should just get started. I've been thinking about this for a while. Maybe they heard it on another podcast, maybe they heard you say it again or whatever it might be. And it's just that little bit of inspiration that just gets them over the edge to take action. We talk a lot on our show about just getting started. Like a lot of times people they just get in their own way, whether it's thoughts of self-doubt or like we talked about the imposter syndrome thing, or maybe it's they don't have the time, or they don't have the bandwidth, or whatever it might be. There's going to be a million excuses. But the way that I look at things like this, when I have these ideas, like a lot of times like I'll get ideas at like 3:30 in the morning. Like I'll wake up thinking something. I'm like, dude, like write it down. If you get inspiration, write it down, especially in the middle of the night, because you will forget it likely. If you have my brain,
mm,
it's gone.
yeah.
So I take that and I'm like, you know what? I just need to do this. Just get started on it. Put 5 minutes toward it. Don't procrastinate. Just dedicate 5 minutes toward getting started, and you'll be surprised to see how far you can get once you get the ball rolling. And then you're moving in the direction of starting, right? Putting something out there, seeing if something works. You find out what works, you accelerate your learnings, you can scale from there. You're going to fail a lot, but learn from it, fail forward, don't give up, and just keep
Mm,
going, keep producing. Like it is
exactly.
the way of business. This is the direction we're going. Content. That's why AI is taking off. Now people can
Yeah.
create content easily, right? They don't have to take as much time to create the content or whatever it might be. There is a demand for content and for the creation of content. Creators want tools to make it easier. Like it's like content is the future. You just have to start. And I'll challenge you too. Like whoever's listening, don't start in 4 months. Look back and think, oh man, what impact could I have had in the last 4 months if I would have started that thing? You know what I mean? It's just like who was on my yeah, I had someone I can't I think it was Osh, maybe it was Oshwin. Oh, Tim Sweetman, I think. He was on my show recently. We haven't launched the episode yet, but he mentioned like the best place to or the best what's the best time to grow a tree? Like to plant a seed
Today.
to grow a tree. Well, 40
Mm,
years ago. But other than
mm,
that, today, right? It's
yeah.
if you don't start, you'll never get the benefits of the growth.
Yeah, I think that's a proverb, isn't it? The best time to start a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. I think it's a proverb. My son's got a
Oh, there
book
you go.
on Padav Jayeng, who was a guy who has essentially built a forest in India. And it
Mm,
talks about how he came across, like hunters trying to hunt the animals that came to live in the forest, and then he had to kind of pick seeds from the village and take it there, and it's all like journey for young kids about how you should persevere and stuff. And then yeah, the ending is that quote, and it's definitely true. And I think
mm,
like as a generation now, or as a world, we consume content. Like if I go on my screen time now and start looking at how much time I'm spending on screens and things like that, I
mm-hmm,
we consume content. So if you aren't telling stories, back to what Sean says, if you aren't telling stories, if you aren't creating value, if you aren't coming hearts and minds, then you're going to lose out. And I think, I was talking to Jay Ashton about why every restaurant should need a podcast on the last episode. And we were talking about how, like when I download all my podcasts, so I've got the Marketing Lab, I've got Restaurant Influencers from Sean, I've got the soccer ones, I've got Diary of the CEO, they're all sitting there. Say like some of the ones for you guys and Sean, I start lining them up in my download list and my saved list. And then every time I go into my podcast app, which is every day because I listen to podcasts twice a day on the train, I'm always seeing the marketing lab. I'm always seeing Sean's face on restaurant influencers. I'm constantly seeing that those brands just sitting there. So if I'm sitting there and at the right time I need something to help me with doing my ads, or I need Cali barbecue, or I need, it's going to be hearts and minds. And then every time you release a new episode, it comes to the top of my feed. So once a week, I'm seeing Evocalize at the top of my feed in the marketing lab. Like we were talking about how much that would cost if you went to Apple today and said once a
Oh,
week, put me a push notification on there. Like it would cost you
yeah.
millions, wasn't it? And it
Yes.
costs what, less than $100 a month for the subscriptions of the thing. So
Yeah.
it's that thing again, isn't it? About like heart of mind, getting into the top retail space that can keep you there for the right time that that person needs to get your product or wants to have a chat with you or whatever
Mm,
the aim of what you're doing the content is.
yeah. And everybody, I mean, obviously generalization, but like everybody loves a good story. Like, why do you think books are so popular in the world? Why do you think movies are so popular? Like, like everyone, like stories engage with people since the beginning of time. Like cavemen drew on the walls with mud to tell stories, right? Stories are what people connect with. A story doesn't have to be some grand thing that we're telling. If you look at what's really popular right now, what's getting a ton of engagement is where companies go, and brands, whatever it may be, whether you're B2B or B2C, you're building in public and you're sharing the story of what you're doing. And what's building in public, it's like, okay, if I'm working on a sale, like Ashwin does a really good job of talking through like his daily process,
100%.
what's happening with certain sales he's going through, or Mike LaRoe does a good job of like opening up and sharing his thoughts. And there are Sean talks about like when Bernice is his pit master, she's like prepping the briskets, like that's getting millions of views. It's just processes, it's things that are, you're putting yourself out there in ways that people get a glance at, like behind the scenes, like why are you thinking this way, why is this your approach, like you're getting people to buy into more than just the brand, right? Brands are really powerful, they have value. If you were to burn every Coca-Cola facility down to the ground, you could probably still sell the logo for billions of dollars, right? The brand has value. But if you're gonna try to, like, with this new age social, we're in the age of social and sharing and stories. You're able to you're able to get your stories out there in ways that we've never been able to, and develop equity in your brand in ways that we've never been able to. Get people to build loyalty to your brand, build an affinity to your brand with more than just commercials or product. It's like they buy into the people, they buy into why you do what you do. We've never had this opportunity, and it's just getting started. So if you're waiting, you're going to miss out, on all the growth
Yeah.
opportunity. We mentioned the 3% is creating the content.
Mm. Yeah. Do you know, yeah, for sure. And I heard someone say on that subject, I heard someone say a while back, if I gave you a book about Nike, you'd think it was okay. I give you
What
Phil
is
Knight's
Nike?
version. Nike, Nike,
Nike?
Nike, Nike. You guys over there
Nike.
in
Okay.
across the pond, cost it Nike, like
So you say
Adidas, which should
croissant
be
really
Adidas.
well, but not Nike.
Nike. Okay. Okay. Fine. So, let me start that again. Right. Rewind. Zzz. Okay. So, a guy told me a few weeks ago. I'm not sure why you're laughing because we're going to edit this bit out. If
Oh,
I
it's not
edit it.
edited. We're building in public.
Exactly. So, anyway, back to the point. What was it? Troy Hooper does a great job of building in public. Who would have thought someone could make opening an EPOS box so fun as Troy Hooper? And what I love about watching Troy, this is nothing to do with Nike. We'll talk about that in a minute. What I love about Troy, do you know what? What I love about Troy building Pepper Lunch in public is, even me, as someone who's worked in the industry 25 years, I look at some of the things Troy talks about and Troy's doing and go, oh, I do that. That's all right then. I must be doing things right. Like it's almost that thing when you're building in public where other people who might have imposter syndrome, who might think, "Do I do it right?" actually go, "Okay, it's a bit of a reaffirmation." So I love Troy's stuff.
Mm.
But back to Nike. Ah, yeah. If I gave you a book about Nike, you'd think it was okay. I give you Phil Knight's version of his story of Nike, and all of a sudden it's a bestseller selling millions and billions of it. I read Greg Hoffman's book about how he was the guru behind marketing at Nike, and all of a sudden you're buying into his stories, and you take
Mm.
from it much more than the story about the trainer that then became a sports brand, etc., etc. So I my point before I said Nike wrong, which I'm never going to do again now, was people do sell, people buy people, don't they? It's true.
Yes. Yeah. And like I said, you're the most important thing you can market is yourself. If you
Mm,
look at if you look at brands typically on LinkedIn, companies typically have far fewer followers than the individuals that lead or that
mm,
work at the organizations. People follow people. They want to hear what people have to say, less around
yeah,
what the company has to say. Typically, companies have a filter, that they operate through, whereas people can be more genuine and are obviously human by definition. So
yeah,
it's just something that we connect with more than we do with companies.
yeah. Um, just in this, we could probably talk all day about this, but we're running out of time. So thank you very much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Keep doing what you're doing with the local marketing lab, because honestly, it's one of the podcasts that I listen to every single week, because the people that you're getting on are just are like full of knowledge. So it's brilliant. And then I love how you turn it into content after. It's as I was saying to you earlier, it was I've been showing my team how you do the podcast into the content, because it's so strong. So for people who might want to ask you questions about podcasts, who might want to talk about Evocalize and how it can help the business, what's the best way people can get in touch?
Yeah, if you just check me out on LinkedIn, just search for Justin Ulrich. I'm the coolest looking one. And then if you want to learn about Evocalize, at Evocalize, Evocalize, across all channels. If you have any questions, reach out on any one of those channels, and I'm one of the people behind them, so we can get in touch. Also,
Yeah,
connect with me
perfect.
on LinkedIn. Like, I connect
Connect
with everybody. I'm all
exactly.
about sharing and growing. So
Yeah, and start now comment on Justin's post and Evocalize's post. And do you know, I was trying to get you an AI image for this, just to bring it up, just to prove he's wrong, but I absolutely failed on it, and so I haven't got one. So you're gonna have to teach me how to do it, because genuinely, my wife still talks about my. If people haven't seen it, find the post somewhere on Evocalize. They've shared it too many times for my liking, but my wife generally still talks about how great I looked in that picture. So it was it definitely goes down well.
oh, awesome! No, that's super good to hear. I mean, it's a ton of fun. Obviously, building images and stuff with AI. So, and when you get guests like you, who are like, the funny thing is, like, the guest also has to be a good sport about it, because otherwise it has such a high risk of falling really flat,
Yeah,
especially if I've never really talked to them. So I only have a picture of what to create the likeness off of, and not a video or a few or whatever. It's risky, but it's been worth it. It's been a lot of fun.
yeah, it's brilliant. Listen, Justin, thank you very much. Really appreciate it, as always. Always great to talk to you, and thanks again for coming on the show.
Likewise, thanks for having me.
You've been listening to Hospitality Huddles, where hospitality needs conversation one huddle at a time. Hospitality Huddles is brought to you in partnership with Auden Hospitality. Visit the website at www.audenhospitality.com. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.